it's a shameful thing, of course. Before the election, I was not very close to Begin over the years between my original leaving politics in 1950, 51, 52. But we kept in touch, and I used to tell him, for example, my visits to America and all the things I had done and the connections I had made resulted in his asking me to go to America on his behalf when he was elected. You wouldn't remember it, of course. When Begin was elected, there was a terrific outburst of propaganda against him. Although you apparently haven't heard about it. All the dirty accusations that had been made for years against Begin while he was in opposition by the Labour Party. You know, that he was a hooligan, a gangster. I don't know, gangster is the word they used, because coming back to the Irgun and the Irgun having fought independently, they always forgot that if it hadn't been for the Irgun, there wouldn't have been a state when it was declared. All this was now transferred while he was in opposition. He was berated, and I'll tell you in a minute how I know about that. And when he was elected, when you get back to the States, look up the press of the days after the election. Take the New York Times, whatever other newspapers, you'll find it's full of propaganda against Begin in the news, so to speak, you see, and how the people here, the people who, the minority here, the Labour Party, what they think of him. Really, there was panic among the Jews in America because they were being told by responsible newspapers, radio and television that this was to be a gangster government. And so Begin called me and asked me if I'd be prepared to go to America to counter all this propaganda. That's how I got into the game at all, into the field at all. I don't think that he was thinking of me, or maybe he was, because why did he contact me? Because just before the election, we'd had a long talk about the terrible state of our information, what we call hasbara, and he'd heard from me that it was a problem that had to be tackled, and that I knew how that I could give him a plan of how to tackle it, which I had. And so he asked me to go to, when he was in this trouble, he asked me to go to America on his behalf, and he told me that he would set up the first ministry he talked about it. He told me and he told the press. He would set up would be a Hasbara ministry, Hasbara office. And he told one of the reporters of Maariv that he had an excellent man to man this. And he told him secretly so that everybody should know that it was going to be me. The whole world knew that I was going to be the Minister of Information in Begin's government. And I went off to America, and this is also a kind of miracle tale, a miracle story. Within 10 days of my arrival in America, the propaganda against Begin stopped. People didn't accept the Likud policy. I mean, the press, the newspapers and so on, but they stopped the attacks on Begin. Now, and it all due to my very, very intensive activity. made 140 appearances or speeches or talks on telephone during the 3 weeks I was there. From morning to night, everybody was at my at me. I was the first representative of this gangster government, you see, and a single representative. You see, there was a focus on me. When somebody suggested to Begin that what's the use of sending one man? You need a whole team. And he told me that. I said, if you send a team, you can. If you want to send a team, send them. Not me. I won't join such a team. You need a focus. You need somebody specific. And I know what to talk about, and I know what about the Irgun as well as about policy. And fortunately for him, he agreed to that. Now, when I say that this book was afflicted in 10 days, it wasn't only because of my activity. I was invited all over the place, of course. Time and Newsweek, newspapers, the Times, everybody wanted to hear what this representative of this gangster was going to say. And then they saw this gangster and found the yeshiva book. But what happened, in my opinion, what happened in particular was when I got to Washington, I had lunch with columnists, a collection of columnists. I suppose about 20 people. Among them was George Will. George Will was an old friend of mine from my previous contacts in America. And he was the only one of the columnists there who was on our side. That's another matter. 3 or 4 or 5 of them asked me hostilely oriented questions. I mean, not terrible, but they weren't on my side. They weren't on our side. They weren't going to change the policy of their papers so quickly, except on the issue perhaps of Begin personally, because after this lunch, people were leaving. They were about to leave the place. One of them came up to me, and I hadn't noticed him before. He said to me, his name was Skelly, S-C-A-L-L-Y apparently, and he was a representative of Newsweek. Afterwards, I think he was ambassador of the United Nations. He said to me, come out with me for a little walk. This was in one of the hotels in Washington, one of the garden there. And he had a photographer with him. And we walked. And there we were, 2 people walking, the grass and the trees. There wasn't a dog there, I don't think. And the photographer taking a picture of this stroll. I don't know what we talked about. If I'm not mistaken, I'm sorry. If I'm not mistaken, we didn't talk politics at all. And I think that what this man wanted to achieve was this picture of 2 people walking along peacefully. One of them is supposed to be a representative of a gangster government, you see, but he doesn't look like a gangster at all. Fortunately, we didn't send anybody this side, you see. And I was told the next day, I heard from people from various parts of the country, this turned the whole thing round. They felt that were obviously just ordinary people, just like us, not gangsters at all. While I was there, I suppose 2 days after my meeting with the columnists, or so, I talked to him on the telephone. We had agreed that I would telephone him twice a week to tell him how I'm getting on. And he told me that the idea of a Ministry of Information and your being a Ministry of Information doesn't work out, because the committee that was appointed to decide on the number of members of the government, the number of members the government should have, had decided that 12 must appoint, no more than 12, and there isn't room for a Ministry of Information. Now, it's nonsense, of course. If Begin needed 13, he would have got 13. But that's what happened, and I don't know if I said to him or I only thought, okay, so I won't be Minister of Information. I had enough of my own on my own fork. I wasn't ambitious in that respect. When I got back, Begin suggested to me that I should join the Foreign Office, number 3 spot in the Foreign Office. Dayan was Foreign Minister. Of course, Dayan was very much against an information office. Foreign Ministers are always against separate information offices. They don't understand that information requires a much larger organization, that it's parallel to the Foreign Office, and even if it sometimes clashes with the Foreign Office, that's a terrible thing. But I think there was a personal reason for Begin. I think he didn't like the idea of so much popularity for me. It was very popular in those days because the Jews in America, I mean, I came and I reassured the whole community that all they'd been hearing about Begin and the Good Party was nonsense. That we were ordinary people. There wasn't a question of horrible, violent people. And apparently, obviously, Begin got a lot of information about this from his friends in America and from elsewhere, that the effort to clamp down on the hostile propaganda had succeeded, because the propagandists Begin stopped completely. I think that he didn't like that. Maybe I'm being unkind, but my logic tells me that he had no reason to give in to any demand for 12 members, for a limit of 12 members. And later on, I asked the chairman of that committee why they had decided only on 12 members. He said they never decided such a thing. So when I got back, he pressed me on this. And I said, I don't want, I'm against the Foreign Office having to deal with Hasbara, and the only thing I'm interested in is the Hasbara issue. And the Foreign Office won't allow me to carry on with Hasbara. There'll be a Minister of the Foreign Minister is there. So Begin said to me, okay, what I suggest is you become an advisor on information to me, and you will be able to do what you could do, what you want to do as a minister, what you would have done, what you would be doing as a minister, except for the title. I didn't like the idea, so I consulted friends of mine in the Land of Israel movement, and they said, take it on, keep your foot inside the government. So I did that, I accepted. And I made a plan. I explained to Begin what I needed. I had a plan. See, first of all, the issue of Hasbara in this country was, and still is to this day, nobody's tackled it since then, that you first have to have a machine for information of the Jewish community. In recent years, you've had this wave of anti-Semitism which struck America as well, especially the campuses. You've had complaints. I don't know if you've come across them. I have. You've had complaints, for example from Berkeley, students who were attacked by anti-Semites who have to answer attackment don't know how to answer. Do you know the history of the Jews in this country? Do you know the history of the Arabs in this country? Maybe their claims are valid. Maybe the Arabs' claims are valid. If you don't know, you don't know. If you've never been taught, schools here don't teach that either properly. I'll give you a small example. When we started the Land of Israel movement, we had this reaction from particularly the younger people here. They really believed that Shem and Hebron were Arab territory, because the schools here did not tell them otherwise. Because the Labour Party, having agreed to the partition of this country, had backed their agreement by not telling the truth. That Hebron and that's it, Gaza, these places were originally Jewish, that they were territory of the Mandate, which had been promised as a Jewish national home, and that now the Arabs having attacked us, and we having for the second time, and we having succeeded in getting it back, we should hold on to it because it's ours. They were not told that. Now, if they didn't know here in Tel Aviv or in the kibbutzim or anywhere else, they weren't told that. Well, how do I expect a Jew in New York or in Wichita or whatever to know anything about it? They got used to the idea that the armistice lines of 1949 are a border. What's his name? Abba Evan was a great exponent of that idea. I remember well his articles, an article which said, nobody ever said next year in Jenin. So I pointed out at that time to Begin that the first campaign, or the first element in the campaign, must be an education of Jews. And it's possible to do it. There are enough people who do know, even in America, who can be grouped together as people who would help us. But I want to appoint 12 people as ambassadors to America, not only to organize Jewish groups everywhere, the kind of thing we have, there's a Zionist organization and there's AFSI and there are other organizations, and then if you have an organizing an organization for doing this sort of thing, you can have groups in every town, in every city, in the United States, helping you both in the question of education and in the question of countering the propaganda of the Arabs. I said I want 12 ambassadors, so to speak, people who know the stuff, people who already have a basis, who have got a degree in Palestine history, in Arab history, who know the three main elements of the dispute here. And on that basis, we'll have a seminar for three months to bring them up to date on the situation, the current situation in the dispute between us, and they will have the necessary ammunition to answer a tax on Jews, for example, kind of thing you've been having these last few years in a very much more serious form than we had 25 years ago. And actually I got a hotel, the Holy Land Hotel, to give us space for the seminar without charge. And I went to the Minister of Finance. I worked out a budget. Ehrlich was the Minister of Finance. Not a very big budget because I expected a lot of voluntary work in America. I'd had some experience of this because when I was on my visit to America, I had a meeting, or a meeting had been arranged for me with professionals, young doctors and lawyers and so on, and I had explained to them what my idea was for Hasbara. And I'd explained to them that I told them that I intended setting up a seminar in Jerusalem for 3 months to what shall I call it, to implement what people already knew, and who could go to America and sort of lead such a campaign. Well, most would go to America. Some would remain here and would be able to maintain a 24-hour service because of the difference in times in case there was an attack. There was an attack on Israel. It's in the newspaper, and the ambassadors I sent to New York wouldn't have a reply, needed some information. They would be able to contact Jerusalem, where somebody would be awake and able to answer these questions. If they couldn't answer, they would get hold of me as a minister. If I couldn't answer, I would get hold of Begin as Prime Minister. They would get the reply to him. Otherwise, a lot of things were said then, as they're said now. They never get a reply because there aren't any people who know the answers. Or the people who should have the answers haven't been given the answers. And then you'll be able to gather from this that I had a comprehensive scheme for the information. It was killed, first of all, well, I don't know who killed it exactly, but when I came to Dayan and said I wanted to send at least 6, but probably 12 people to America, he said he's quite prepared to do that, but for 2 or 3 weeks, yes. I said, no, I need them for 2 or 3 years. That's why I call them ambassadors and not tourists. They've got to work there. They've got to travel the country. And America is quite a big country, much bigger than Israel. No, he doesn't agree to that. When I said this to Begin, he stopped the whole scheme. Never explained it to me. And of course, Dayan didn't have all that power in the country. If Begin wanted something that Dayan didn't want it, and Begin had told him, you just got to take it, the way Churchill told Eden in England when war broke out, and he set up a Ministry of Information. Eden didn't like it, and he told Eden, you stay where you are, you do your job, now I've got to do this job. And he appointed the Ministry of Information, and set up a ministry that was as big as it was the biggest ministry in the country except for the war ministry. It was a big job.
Is that where you got the idea?
Pardon?
Is that where you got the idea to set it?
No, I worked out the idea with an American named Forster. That this story of the Churchill, I must have remembered it, of course, because I was in England at the time, and it was part of the folklore, you see, that Eden had objected and Churchill had forced him. No, what got me thinking about how to do things was during my visits to America, I had a number of talks with Arnold Forster, who was the counsel to the Anti-Defamation League. You know, Foxman set up. Foxman was the not the head of it. And Forster told me the following story. He worked as a lawyer, but he came into the office in the evenings. And one evening, he stayed late till about 10 o'clock, and he went downstairs and bought the Times, the next morning's Times. And there was an item in the Times, he told me what it was, I don't remember what it was, which was very, very hurtful to Israel. And so he went upstairs again and wrote out the reply. When he'd done so, it struck him that maybe he ought to put this up to Israel, to the ambassador. Maybe it's not suitable or whatever, maybe it ought to be changed. And he called up the embassy. The ambassador wasn't there. And there was somebody there. He gave me the name, Navon. And Navon told him that the ambassador was not in Washington at all. The ambassador was in at the time. Where was he? He was in San Diego. He said, call him in San Diego. He said, I don't know where he is in San Diego. Okay, tomorrow morning. Leave it till tomorrow morning. Good enough. He said there was no tomorrow morning or the next morning or the morning after that. It took 10 days before I got the reply, and I was told that it's now too late to answer this thing. And so that's where the idea came to me that you must have a continuous service of 24 hours for somebody to reply. And you must have an organization to have to reply. You can't have one man only. You need a lot of people to do that sort of thing. And you shouldn't have to apply to the ambassador. You should have a whole group of people devoted to information working in America. Now, nobody has come up with any idea since then, and in spite of the fact that nobody could tell me this was a bad idea, Reagan decided that he didn't want a Minister of Information, and he didn't appoint one, and nobody has appointed one ever since then.